Hello friends, welcome to the Postman tutorial series from Software Testing Help. In this tutorial, we will see response validations through assertions in Postman. As part of the agenda, we'll see how we can add tests to a Postman request. We'll also compare it to the unit test analogies, that is arrange, act and assert. We'll see how we can add assertions as response validators in Postman request, and we'll also see some advanced assertions like validating value of a field in a response body or validating the JSON response against a predefined schema. So let's get started. So I have my Postman console application open, and I have a collection named Postman pre and post request scripts with one request named get user. I'm using a fake data API that's publicly available, which is https request.in, and I'm using the endpoint which fetches the user information given user ID. So suppose the user ID is 4 here, I click send and I'll get back some JSON data. This is again some fake data that is provided by this API. So first let's see how we can compare or contrast it to the arrange, act and assert philosophy. So in unit testing world, to do a unit test or to run a unit test, it has essentially three components. Arrange means trying to set up the test, like trying to set up the preconditions or the actual state of the system in order to run the request or test. So arrange means setting up the data. So the pre-request script tab here means arrange. Here we can add any setup scripts that are required. Normally not required, but yes, we can write if we want. Act means the actual execution of the request. That means clicking the send button. This means act. And assert means the test tab where we'll be writing our actual test. Now before we get started, it's important to understand that we can have individual request level assertions as well as collection level assertions. So collection level assertions apply to all the requests that are present as part of the collection, whereas individual requests carry request level assertions. So let's get started. We'll first try to add a simple assert which will do something as basic as validating the status code that was returned as part of the response. So suppose we are sending this request and we can see the status code is 200. Okay, we'll use the Postman sandbox object, that is pm, to write the test here, and the syntax is pm.test. This is the test name. You can give any friendly string here, and it is a JSON or JavaScript closure function, and I'll say pm dot response to have status 200. So all these assertion or BDD type of assertions are basically coming from chai assertion library. This is again a common JavaScript based assertion library. It provides a lot of assertions and they are again easy to read. Anyone can just read it and try understand what we are trying to get from here. So let's hit send and see what happens. So we can see we got a response, and there is another tab called test results which says that there was one test executed and out of which one passed. So all green means all of the tests passed, and it gives the name status code is 200, which we wrote here, and it says pass since the status code actually is 200. Now let's try failing this test. I'll say status code is 202. I'll change the description as well. I click send. So now yes, it says that test results 0 of 1 passed, and it gives an informative error message that status code is 202 was the expectation, but our assertion failed. It says expected response to have status code is 202 but got 200. So it is pretty informative and easy to understand. So that's the kind of most basic assertions that you can add in your Postman request. Now we'll see adding some advanced assertions. So let's try adding validating JSON parameter value. So let's refer to body. Here we can see say ID is some numeric. So let's write a test to validate whether the JSON response ID field is greater than 0. Also, you can see on the right side, there are some predefined code snippets available for adding assertions or tests. So you can see these are get a variable, set an environment variable. These are all post request scripts. So if I click here, the code snippet will come. So this is a code snippet to get the value of any variable. So these are easy shortcuts to get these scripts. So you can see that status code is 200 is also there. So it will simply replace the entire test here, and we don't want to write any other single line of code. It's just click and forget and you'll see that the test gets added. So response body is equal to string. We don't want to check the response body but a JSON value check. So this is also available as a predefined script. So we can say that let's add name here that ID is greater than 0. And so where JSON data is getting or extracting the JSON out of the response, so JSON data will contain all this response, and it's basically the parent element. So it starts from the outer curly brace, and now we want to get to the ID. So we'll have to write JSON data dot ID to be greater than 0. I'm not sure if this works or chai assertion library provides this, but yes, we can try this. No, it does not work. No, we can simply search. We can probably use is above. Let's try it in here. Yes, so this works. So we'll use is above 0 to see that ID is greater than 0. If I write is below 0, I'll expect the test should fail. It says expected 4 to be below 0, which is essentially negative, and that's why it failed. So yes, this is how you can validate a field in the response body. Let's try another common scenario, which is validating the schema. So schema is nothing like in XML you have XML schema. Similarly for JSON you can have JSON based schemas, and you can directly generate a JSON schema using the response body itself if you don't have a schema. So you can simply copy this JSON response, and there are few online providers like online JSON to schema converter. Simply add your JSON data here and say generate schema, you can see that there is an inferred schema here, and let's use this schema to basically validate the incoming response. I'll declare a var schema to have this value, and I'll add a test that schema is valid. pm.expect is the syntax for assertions in Postman. This again comes from the chai library. And in this pm.expect, now we need to validate the assertion. There is a tiny validator library that is used for validating the assertion. I have a code snippet here. I'll simply use it. pm.response.json will give me the actual JSON, and here you go. So tv4 is a tiny validator library that's part of the Postman sandbox itself. tv4 with validate will take a JSON, that is the response JSON, and it will validate it against the schema that we have defined in the and it will use the schema that we have defined in the test tab. And then we have used a chai assertion saying to be true. Let's try hitting this, and we can see that we have three tests. Status code is 200, id is greater than 0, and schema is valid. So every pm.test block is an individual test in Postman, and an individual test can contain multiple assertions. So like this test, I can add multiple assertions here. Like I can add here pm.response to be not equal null, suppose. And let's try executing this. So this test as a whole pass, and it will pass if all the assertions inside this test passes. So suppose I change this assertion to be equal null. Now we'll expect that this test will fail since one of the assertion in the test is failing. I'll click send, and we can see here that the second assertion is failing. Also, there is an important point to note here, that if there is an assertion that fails inside the test execution stops there, and the further assertions will not be executed there. So suppose I write this assertion response to have status 200 below a failing assertion, we'll still see this failing, and we know that this code did not get executed. But individual test blocks will get executed no matter if previous test passed or failed. But in assertions, that's not the case. So that's it for this tutorial on introduction on assertions. Thank you.